Good morning, friends. This is the video for the first week of NTI instruction, and I hope that your family is safe and that you are practicing social distancing so that we can see each other again soon. Our first unit is going to start on the U.S. getting involved or decision to not get involved on imperialism. If you remember from last year, we talked about the Opium Wars, how the British got China hooked on opium to dominate their economy through economic imperialism. And we also talked about the scramble for Africa with all of Europe going over to Africa to take over their territory for the quest for raw materials. Now, the quest for raw materials was to fulfill their needs of industrialization because in Europe they didn't have as vast of a stockpile of natural resources as we do in the US as a result of them not having as much land as us. So while Europe was trying to seek out other sources for those things that they needed for their factories, the United States didn't really have that same desire because they already had those resources in our territory because we had reached from sea to shining sea already at this point. So while the rest of the world was getting involved and the United States was too becoming a superpower just like Europe, they were trying to decide how do they maintain that status while also not getting involved in imperialism. And so there was arguments for both sides, as you'll see in the slides, and the United States was trying to figure out who they are on a global scale at this point. So reasons why they wanted to get involved in imperialism: one, economic opportunity, because while we have resources in our country, we could get them from Africa or Asia, and that would leave our resources to use later. We have already industrialized, as we've already talked about. We've talked about our friends Carnegie, Vanderbilt, Rockefeller, and so they're looking for the cheapest supply of those resources because, as you know, they're already only out for profit. And so they are looking for how can we get these resources the cheapest? Is it cheaper to stay at home and use what we have here, or is it more beneficial to go to Africa and get them instead? Also, there's social Darwinism going on, and so we've talked about this with immigration and all these different immigrants coming to America, but we should also realize that social Darwinism in last year's context, we talked about how Europe should dominate the entire world because they were seen as the better race. And so the United States was trying to figure out if they are going to apply this mentality to other nations as well, or if they're just going to use it at home. And so the last one is competition with Europe, because while we do have all these resources at our home country, we also don't want to lose our competitive edge with Europe. And if they're getting all these resources from Africa and Asia, should the U.S. be doing the same? And so we are trying to figure out how can we still stay competitive with Europe, but also not violate our American values, the ones that we are upholding at this point, regardless of class and race and the climate at the time period. Then there was also the arguments against imperialism, which end out winning because we would be isolationists. So, and that is important to realize because this is the climate that we continue to hold true all the way up through World War I, because we don't get involved until the very last year of the war in 1917. So this idea of isolationism is where you'll find a lot of our American values are rooted in, because we didn't want to get involved because we thought we could handle things on our own and we didn't need help from anyone else. So if you've ever heard the phrase, pull yourself up by your bootstraps in America, work hard. If you work hard enough, you'll achieve the American dream. This is where that is originating from. And so this idea of self-determination is that America doesn't need to go into these territories because we have everything we need on our own and we don't need anybody else's help. We are the country from sea to shining sea, and if we admit that we are weak and we need resources from somewhere else, we don't want to do that. And so the whole idea of isolationism is that we should just worry about ourselves and our issues and not get involved in other people's business, and just, we have a lot of issues on our own already. We talked about the reform movements from last unit, women's rights, political bosses, how to maintain control over those big businesses and how much of a role we're going to allow them to have in society. And so the isolationists believe that we have enough issues going on at home and we don't need to expand them further into other nations and spread our problems across the world. And so the philosophy is going to remain, and it's what America is going to base their involvement in World War I off of. And we are heading into World War I very soon, because this is the early, 1890s, early 1900s, and 1914 is when World War I starts. And so This is kind of setting the foundation for the national climate of how the United States is going to react to global events, because this is the first really high tension that's going to be in World War I. If you remember our causes from last year, the acronym of MANIA, M-A-N-I-A, militarism, assassination, nationalism, imperialism, alliances. The I is imperialism. So this is one of the building blocks for World War I, and this is this first lesson is about how the United States is going to react to that and what our role is going to be in that. And us staying out of imperialism is a big reason as to why we thought we shouldn't get involved in World War I, because we didn't have a dog in the fight. We didn't participate in imperialism. That wasn't our thing. And so while our allies were going to get involved in World War I because they already had all this built up tension from imperialism, which is what we're talking about right now, the United States is going to sit back and say, you know, we didn't participate in imperialism, so this isn't really our fight. We'll help you and we'll send resources and supplies, but actually putting boots on the ground is not us, not our thing right now, until we'll talk about future events later. So this is the world gearing up for World War I and building those tensions and basically stirring the pot to figure out who's biggest and who's baddest and who can conquer the most land and who can get the most resources. And the United States is going to sit on our side of the hemisphere and just chill, honestly. And we're going to make things on our own. We're not going to get resources from any other places, and we're going to keep our nose on our own face, to put it in modern terms, and we're going to figure out who we are on the global scale and kind of just stick within our own boundaries and watch Europe prepare to blow itself up, and while we remain unscathed. And so I hope this helps introduce the topic of imperialism for you for this first part of our new unit. You can always reach out to me through text or email, on Remind or on Gmail. So I hope that you guys are maintaining safety in this quarantine that we're having, and know that I miss you guys already. And yes, I look a hot mess, but I love y'all and I miss y'all, and I hope that this assignment is pretty easy for y'all to get through. Bye!